So I've seen time and time again in society where people with physical ailments, such as a broken leg, a skin condition, a person with an oxygen tank, or in a wheelchair, are accepted as being differently able, be it a short term condition, long term, permanent. They're treated with empathy, understanding, and even care. While I've seen others who may be too dealing with an issue, a health issue, not physically seen except with the trained eye, and if there are any symptoms, who suffer from mental health conditions that are ignored, judged, or even criticized, and not even treated with any sensitivity or care. I've watched some people even say, well, they just need to get their life together, man up, or get off the drugs or alcohol or whatever, never considering that just like those with visible wounds and ailments, they too may need the same type of care and concern, understanding, empathy, and even the time to heal as those who carry their conditions outwardly. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean that it isn't real and a serious issue. I mean, I actually saw a man wagging his finger at another man who parked in a handicapped space, telling him he isn't disabled just because he didn't see any crutches or a wheelchair. I know, I know. That is no way to start a show. So I'll start over and I'll be right back. Well, hello, and welcome to In Your Ear Radio. I am your host, Latoya, as always. So very happy to be with you on this beautiful Saturday. It's supposed to be windy, a little breezy, but it's still nice, really nice. I can't complain out here. So wherever you are, I hope you have nice weather as well. I don't know what the temperature is right now. I have to go and check that. So while you guys are hopping in, let me go ahead and share this video to my group as well. Don't forget to like and share, you guys, if you enjoy In Your Ear Radio. And let me see. I'm going to share this to my group. In Your Ear Radio. Thank you for all of those who have joined me already live in the chat. Shout out to GB, who's always or usually first in the chat on YouTube. And for those of you who are joining me on Facebook as well, I appreciate you. I'm really excited to have this conversation today, and we're going to get into it. So I want to make sure you guys are prepared. If you have questions, if you have scenarios that you'd like to share, I welcome you to do that today. We'll have someone who will be able to assist us and navigate us through this conversation. So I'm looking forward to that, and I hope that you all are too. But I first want to give my shout outs to anyone who's celebrating a birthday today, right? Okay, Aries season, that's what's up. My sweetie just celebrated his birthday, and that was awesome. And for anyone who's celebrating a birthday, it's always a blessing to be able to celebrate the life of anybody. I know some people have their religious beliefs and they don't really partake in the celebration of our solar return. But over here we do, and we celebrate it just because we're alive, and we exist to be able to do so. So if you're celebrating your birthday and you're Aries, you're all right with me. You're all right with me. Okay. Shout out to Spelman College that was founded in 1881 on this day as well. If you guys don't know, that's a historically Black women's college. I was doing the research on it because I didn't know a whole lot about it, except that it was a historically Black, women's college. But it was actually founded by two women, one by the name of Harriet Giles and Sophia Packard. And so I was pulling them up because I wanted to see if they were Black women. And they pictures, what I'm saying? It was in black and white. So it's skeptical, but they don't look like Black ladies. So, I got questions, and I'll do the research later, and we'll talk about that on another day. But they don't look like Black women. One of them looked like she had wavy, she had wavy hair. But anyways, I just thought that was interesting if they're not, because everywhere that I researched about them, it just said they were American women. It didn't say African American or they're, if they were immigrants or children of immigrants or anything of that nature. So I don't know a lot about them. But here on April 11th, 1881, the first they had in the basement of a Friendship Baptist Church in Atlanta. These two teachers, again, Harriet Giles and Sophia Packard, founded the Spelman College. So shout out to y'all who have, the alum and whatnot. Also, another interesting thing about that, before I move along from that story, is that the first Black woman president of a historically Black college was just in 1987. Mind you, I just told you it was founded in 1881. But the first Black woman president of this HBCU was there from 1987 to 1997. Her name was Jonetta Besh, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, Cole. I just thought that was interesting too. So it's a lot to get into with that story. It's a lot of tea. You know how I get my Wendy Williams on when the tea pops. So let me sip a little tea. Yeah, I think it's a lot going on with that. But anyways, if you guys don't know, a lot of the reason why we even have historically Black colleges for male or women is because, of course, we weren't accepted into other institutions. You guys know the history of us just trying to segregate into these public institutions. So we had to create our own. But having said that, and looking at who the people are who created our own, with air quotes, I got more to say about that. And again, I'll talk about that later. And a shout out to Perry L. Julian. He is a Black man, a chemist whose research helped create drugs for treatment of arthritis. He was born in 1899 on this day. So shout out to him. Black excellence has been around for a very long time, for those who may not be familiar or don't know. And I don't know what you guys have been watching. I haven't been watching a lot. I just wrapped up season 2 of Beauty and Black. My guilty pleasure. Oh my goodness. Everybody on there is rude except the little sister. But it's enjoyable. I'm just telling you. They just talk crazy to the driver. You don't know if the driver's gonna drive you into a ditch. You should be nice to people who are servicing you. I'm just saying that. But I love it. But anyway, I finished season 2 and it's great. So if you haven't seen it, I encourage you to watch it. I think it was produced by Tyler Perry. I also watched again Henrietta Lacks, The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, and another movie on Netflix. It was about a radioactive thing that happened outside of the country and I can't remember all the details, but it was very interesting. And maybe I'll talk about it next week once I remember all of the details. But anyway, there was a nuclear bomb or something that was left behind. It ended up plaguing the community. And it was very interesting because it reminded me of COVID. I got to see what nuclear energy actually looks like. I didn't know that it actually glows in the dark. Whatever that nuclear stuff is, it glows in the dark. And the people, by just touching it, it spread and made people sick, and a lot of people died from it. And I thought about COVID because the same symptoms that you would get just by being in the room with a person who was infected with COVID would be the same symptoms you would get from the nuclear bomb, whatever that poison is. And it's just interesting, when I think about those things and kind of tie that in together too. So no conspiracy theories here, just something to think about. But then after watching Henrietta Lacks and, then reiterating the point that I thought I knew, that her cells, her cells she lives on forever because her cells have been what has been the research in so many ways, saved lives, and it just done so many great things from the time of, she went into the surgery until today. They're still using the HeLa cell, and some of her cells are even used to build the atomic bomb. So that was interesting to me, and I'm just like, wow, we'll get into that more anyways. But I definitely wanted to shout out birthdays, and I wanted to, just give you a little history before we get into this conversation, which I think is very, very necessary. We can't talk about it enough. And I'm just grateful that we have someone here who understands this whole mental health issue and to help us understand it more too. Shout out to Shanta, who's in the chat. I see you, Genuine Poet. She says, happy Saturday. Happy Saturday to you. Yes. And Shanta is saying there were white women allies, 2 white women from Massachusetts. The other, yes, she was a percentage. So she's talking about the 2 women who founded the Spelman College. They were white women allies. Okay, we like them. I just think it's interesting that white people, when I do the history on HBCUs, that a lot of it had to do with white people establishing them. So Thank you. And thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. She says interesting facts I'm sharing. Yeah, so I was just scrolling on social media and I saw a headline that said the TLC Salt and Pepper and In Vogue tour was canceled. But then I started reading the comments because that's where you got to go for the juice, right? That's where you got to go for the tea, the comments. And then it was like, no, it ain't canceled, da, 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 da. And of course, I looked it up and no, it's not canceled. But I thought it was for a minute. And I was like, oh, people are really mad about Chile spreading conspiracy theories and supporting the Trump campaign. So I thought that was interesting, but that was false information, y'all. You have to drill in and do your research. But it triggered a thought thinking about Kanye. And this is, relative to the conversation that we're going to have today, because Kanye is touring here locally in the United States. And I heard he's having sellout tours. He was in LA and, it looked like it was a phenomenal stage presence and just awesome. But I thought about Kanye because I also know that his tour was to also land in the UK, which they banned him from even entering the UK now. And the tour that was happening in the UK has been canceled. If you guys aren't familiar, it was a wireless festival, which was set to take place in London's Finsbury Park and was canceled. And again, he was blocked. And they just said because due to the anti-Semitic remarks that Kanye has made, they just decided it wasn't a good look. A lot of sponsors had dropped off before. Mind you, Kanye said all this stuff before the tour took effect. So I think it had a lot to do with the fact that a lot of people didn't want to sponsor him because of all the anti-Semitic things he had said. Y'all know he had a song called Heil Hitler. I think he sold like swastika shirts at a Super Bowl party. He said a lot of disparaging things about the Jewish community and then later apologizing. But on top of that, he also said disparaging things about Black people, saying that slavery was a choice and, celebrating a man who is currently the president, who a lot of people do not support. And so we side-eyeing him, right? We side-eyeing him. And he's done some things, questionable things. You think about him being on stage with Taylor Swift and saying Beyonce should have got the award. And then we found out later that he reported that he was diagnosed in 2016 with a bipolar disorder. And so, this was after a psychiatric emergency he had and hospitalization, which was publicly discussed in the subsequent years, describing him as having periods of paranoia, impulsive behavior. And he actually refers to his bipolar diagnosis as a superpower. And in 2018, he also had an album, highlighting both the creative highs and the challenges associated with that condition. So again, he said he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, which again is a manic hypomanic episodes. And again, I'm looking forward to Walter, speaking more to that because I definitely don't have any expertise in this topic. But that was the thing. So we kind of said, okay, Kanye, he dealing with some stuff. So he, all the sporadic things he was doing, we kind of like gave him a pass. But we side-eyeing him. And when people ask me, I say he's not welcome to the cookout just because of the way he disrespected Black people in general. And people say, again, blame it on not the alcohol, but his bipolar disorder. And so I thought it was interesting to see so many people headlining his concert. It kind of threw me off. It was Lauryn Hill. It was, who else? Erykah Badu was present. Who else was present? The comedian, who was a comedian? Forgive me for you guys. Oh, Dave Chappelle, Lauryn Hill performed, Travis Scott, CeeLo Green, they all performed. And I got to judge them. So how do y'all feel about that? And we're going to talk about it because do we just accept that he's having a mental health condition and not just throw him away, or how some people will say, throw the baby out with the bathwater? Or just Kanye just be held accountable overall? So I want to get into that subject matter and talk about that too and see how you guys feel if mental health should be excused for the things that he has said disparaging towards the Jewish community and even people like himself in the Black community. So let's get into it. And so right now I want to go ahead and welcome our guest, who all of you guys are patiently awaiting to speak with. And again, his name is Walter Williams. And I'll just give you a little background about him before I bring him on. Walter Williams is an MS-LPC. He is a devoted advocate for positive change. He's deeply committed to the philosophy of servant leadership. He's a proud Chicago native. Walter has earned both his BS and his MS in rehabilitation psychology from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. His journey in this field of mental health began as a juvenile court worker in Wisconsin. He went to serve as a high school counselor and has since advanced to practicing as a psychotherapist and life coach. Walter champions a holistic approach to well being, focusing on mental fortitude, physical development, and spiritual upliftment. His company is not just a business, it's a mission driven endeavor aimed to transforming lives. Mr. Walter here. I'm frozen. So I got to wait to unfreeze. I'm sorry, y'all.
There we go. There we go. Are we live? Are we
Oh,
live
you're
right
here. I
now?
don't know what
There
happened.
we
I was
go.
frozen. I didn't know what was happening. Could you
Yeah,
hear
it did
anything?
for a second, but I'm here. Yeah, you froze for a hot second, but we still live.
Oh,
Thank you. Thank you for
oh,
having me
so they
on.
didn't call the bio?
Yes, I heard the bio. I was
Okay.
agreeing
All
with
right.
it.
Well, let me give you your applause. Hold on, hold on, hold on.
I appreciate that.
Thank you so much for joining me today
Of course.
to have this very important discussion. I'm so excited and just grateful for your presence. I got the opportunity to meet you along with a workshop you did with my cousin, Shanta Jackson, was the reset. And I was very impressed just by your story and everything that you had to share with us. And so I'm just glad to have you here. And I think the audience is going to benefit from you being present today. So thank you.
Of course. Thanks for having me and for inviting me to share this platform with you in your ear. I'm excited to have some raw and fruitful discussion today.
Okay, cool, cool. Okay, they let me know I'm good now. Yes, thank you so much. Okay, so I
Welcome.
want to get into before we get into the meat and potatoes, we went over the bio, just explaining what your background is in this field. I want you to tell us a little bit about yourself, like growing up in Chicago, who you are, who your parents are, and just your background, where you come from.
Yeah, happy to share. Born and raised Chi-Town, South Side to be exact. For people who are from Chicago, Roseland, the Wild Hunnets. I obviously got to give a shout out to where I'm from, because that's where I learned a lot, I observed a lot, and I grew a lot. That helped me to be who I am today. Grew up in an environment that was what I like to say was drug ridden, an environment where my mom was both a user and a dealer. So the economic side of the hustle, but also impacted by the use of the substance, crack cocaine to be specific, knowing the play that it had on our Black community. But grew up with my mom. My grandmother was there. My older brother, who was in and out of jail my entire life. My older sister, I have two older sisters. Grew up with a dad. My father, he came into my life more securely when I was about 7 to 8 years old. And he transitioned when I was about 14. So I didn't get a chance to really build a depth of a relationship with him, but was able to get something out of it, and in hindsight, learned a lot more than I had given him
Yeah,
credit for. I'm about 15. My mom transitioned, so I lost both parents within a year. They weren't together, but to have that back to back loss was pretty tremendous, for an impressionable teenager at that time. But looking back, I see how I was navigating and working through it. But it was something that propelled me to become a caregiver quite early on in life,
yeah,
and to assume the role of being a man before I even fully knew what being a man was. I'm 14, 15, and what does that mean, right?
yeah.
But taking on that responsibility and then having to lead the way, lead the charge, as the youngest of my tribe, as the youngest of my siblings.
Wow.
But through all of that, was able to navigate the waters and not go to
Not go to
jail.
jail.
I get
Amen.
caught up in some things that I know I shouldn't have been. I'm not going to say I didn't attempt to engage in some activities, but I didn't. I wasn't convicted by what I saw. I used what I saw to motivate me to do something different. So I took education very serious. I was fortunate to get a full ride scholarship to UW Madison. That's where you got to shout out Wisconsin, because that was my get out the hood card. It was either the army or a scholarship to college. I was fortunate to take my grades serious. I view school as work. Like I got to
Yeah.
show up, I got to put in the work so that I can get my pay. And when they was like, "We're gonna give you this full ride scholarship," I'm like, "God is good. Thank you for the pay." So I was able to get to college, and from there, my life just continued to change and transform. I'm left feeling some survival guilt. I'm leaving my
I
people
was gonna
behind.
say survivor's guilt. I was thinking that while you were talking.
Yeah, some of that remorse came up because I feel like I mean, I escaped. I had some
Yeah.
friends who guys were taken, some friends who was caught up in the system. I was one of the ones that was able to navigate and pivot from all of that. But I felt this sense of remorse and guilt that was deep. But really, what I used that feeling to get me involved with the community in Madison, Wisconsin, where I went to college, learning that many of the black folks were from Chicago or nearby area, or at least claimed to be from Chicago. So it was my invitation to engage with them. So that's how I got hooked up with the Dane County Juvenile Detention Center. I'm supporting that youth based on my study, learning that a lot of the behavior that the youth were displaying has something to do with their mental health in a way. So to close that gap, knowing I can be in the city often, and also realizing that I had grown up so much and detached from it, and also how traumatizing it was, as complicated as that sound, that was my way to give back to my hood without having to be physically in my hood because I needed to graduate. I had a commitment that I made to myself. But that's a little bit about it. I don't want to labor too much on that, but happy to answer any specific questions that you may have or the audience may have.
That's a lot. I'm still at 14 and 15 back to back, losing both your mother and your father. I can't imagine how you navigated that, being the youngest child and putting yourself in a leadership role. Like, that's just got to be in you. I'm going to just quote Nipsey Hussle. It ain't on you, it's in you. If you able to come out, you know what I'm saying? Come out, like you say, you didn't go to jail, you were able to use your adversities to actually come out and help other people. Like, how did you navigate that though? Like at 14 and 15 without having your parents, what is that like? Like, geez.
Yeah, it was tough. It was tough. When you're in it, you really don't know how you're navigating it, to be
Yeah.
honest. Like when you're in the midst of something, because it's so in front of you that you just dealing with what's in front of you. But
That's
in hindsight, and when you zoom out and look at it from a eagle's eye, if you will, or a different level of perspective, you start to realize the things that you were doing to navigate it. So one, my faith. Grandma kept us in church growing up. Though we were kids, I did listen. I did adhere to what I was learning while in church of, having a strong belief system, believing in something that was bigger than myself,
yeah.
having faith that things will be okay. Keeping my mind renewed on the things that's to come. I'm recognizing that where I was only temporary. So I had a lot of faith. I had a lot of wisdom at such a young age. I was always considered the old man or the uncle or the grandpa because the wisdom and the perspective or the game that I would share, it seems to have been from a lifetime that was before me. So I was always able to connect with people on a deep level that my age didn't qualify me to do, if that makes sense. So at my young age, I was always the leader. Thinking about, when I played basketball, wasn't the best of the game whatsoever, but I was always captain. If
Okay, look at that.
I scored 2 points, I'm like, let's go. But I was always able to,
Right.
sportsmanship, connection, camaraderie ship, all of those things, right? That allow me to assume the role of a leader. But my faith, my wisdom, and then just having this work ethic that I'm
Yeah.
not going to allow my environment to determine my path. Like I'm going to determine my path. So I just had this will and this drive to. What I used to say was that my circumstances were lying on me, and what I meant by that is at the time, like this wasn't going to be my life forever, and
Amen.
I just had to hold out just a little bit longer because I knew I was going to get older. And I knew if I was able to navigate, the landmines that were set for me to step on, I knew I would be okay. So that's when my faith kind of got doubled. But I would say those things is what helped me to navigate. But of course, during the time, I didn't know. I was just doing what I was told to do
Yeah.
as a young boy.
Yeah, 100%. I feel you, especially because I grew up, through adversity. I live in an environment where there was drugs, there was violence,
Mhm.
all of the things that happened, the epidemics, and all the things that happened with the gang violence, having, people being victims of gun violence, teen pregnancy, again, the drugs, and all of
Mhm.
that, and thinking just like you, that this isn't it. This is just, I don't have control of my circumstances now. But when I get control, I already had big dreams on how I was going to handle life. So I definitely feel where you're coming from. So I know that's just a natural thing in your spirit. But I know some other people who were in the same environment as me didn't, I don't know if they necessarily saw that, but they were in the moment. And so some of those people maybe you channeled that anger. Some I know lost a parent at a young age, around the same age as you, and got into gang violence and took their frustrations and just whatever they were dealing with negatively out into the world, into society. And so it's just amazing how we all respond differently to whatever's happening in our life. And it's just a blessing to be able to not be a victim. And I when you were talking and you were saying how you survived and so many of your friends are maybe in jail, how we say in the hood, you either in jail or hell, you're going to jail or hell dealing with the lifestyle that a lot of us end up getting into. There is a level of survivor's remorse. I can't really relate to that because I never feel a way. I've lost friends along the way, but I never feel like, I wasn't supposed to be here or they should have, that I'm something, I shouldn't have been here and they should have been here. I feel like we all have our purpose and our timeline, and that it is our, we should focus solely on leaving a legacy that we want to leave behind. And that's all we can do, right? We don't have control over it. So I feel
Yeah,
you.
I'm with that. I think for me, the remorse was more so like I want y'all to be here with me, because these are the decisions I made to get me here. But like, come get this game with me. Come get this exposure
Yeah.
with me. Come connect to these resources. That was something I had in mind for my brother. I think about 2015, he got out of jail, and I moved him to Wisconsin. I'm like, let's come up. Like, I'm gonna tap you into my network. To my people are your people. But I soon learned that he didn't desire the things that I desired for him.
Yeah.
Right, what I wanted for him was different from what he wanted for himself, and that was hard for me to accept, because here I am, laying out the red carpet upon your release. You know how it is when our people go to jail. They come
Yeah.
home. I put him up in a apartment. Put some money in his pocket, give him all of the essentials that he need. But yet you still resist, the exposure and opportunity. So it
Yeah.
took a while for me to have to check myself on that remorse. So it was more like, come share this with me. Like, I don't want to be the only one.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, I feel you on that for sure.
That's a hard thing too, because everybody can't come. It's like Harriet Tubman energy. It's like those who
Yeah.
understand, let's go. Those who don't, just might be a
Not,
misunderstanding.
not everybody want to go, right? Some people,
Right.
some people
Right.
are comfortable where they are, and you gotta be okay with leaving them behind.
And you have to be okay with that and not have that guilt. So yeah.
Yeah.
I hope your brother's doing good now, and the rest of your family, those who are still here with us. Um, Reading your title, it says MS and LPC. For those who may not understand them letters in the alphabet, what that means behind your name, explain what MS and LPC is.
Yeah, it's just to say I'm legit in what I do. That I went through the rigorous process of school to get the training and the education. So the MS is the Master of Science in Rehabilitation Psychology, and the LPC is Licensed Professional Counselor. So to qualify for LPC, you have to have a master's level degree, go through a testing process. You pass the test with a certain percentage or higher. You then go through 3,000 hours to become officially licensed, at least in the state of Wisconsin. And most states honor that 3,000 hours, but I can really speak to Wisconsin and in Alabama, where I'm both licensed at. And then, once you complete that, you qualify to be officially licensed as a professional counselor. And I was able to get that over almost 7 years ago now.
Oh wow! Look, you look too young to be degree 7 years ago. But anyway, I'm gonna say out your
I know,
business.
right?
Okay, they say black don't crack, so it's all good.
That is true. That is true. You take care of yourself. It shows for you. That's right.
Yes, yes. I think that's definitely an important part of mental health, and it might be sound a little vain, but some of the things I like to do, just breathe and not let things stress me, because I don't want people to see what I've been through. You know what I mean? You just
Yeah.
never know a person's story, and it's always surprising to hear, other people tell their story, and so that is another thing when we're dealing with mental stress and the things that come with mental health, that it could wear on our bodies, not just internally with our organs and our arteries, but also physically, could age you super fast. So I think that's important for us to focus on too, because it might sound a little vain, but if it's showing on the outside, that means it's horrible on the inside.
You feel me?
Would
Yeah.
you agree?
100%. 100%. Because it starts from the inside out, and I was listening to you talk about Kanye, and the gentleman who was pointing his finger at someone else who didn't appear to have a disability. Because there are some, you
Yeah,
know, there are some that are what we call invisible, right? You can't see them. You can't see
invisible.
someone's bipolar. You can't see someone's schizophrenia. You can't see
Yeah,
someone's personality. You can probably see some of the behavior and be like, if you know, aware of it, but you can't see it, you know, because I can smile at you and you really don't know what's going on in my head at the same time, you know. So you
yeah.
spot on.
And as people who, our loved ones may be experiencing this, we don't we don't know what to recognize. We write them off for just being. I mean, even as juveniles, I mean, you might be able to speak to this, having worked with youngsters. Did you see a lot of kids who, in retrospect, maybe you didn't have that expertise in, but in retrospect, did you see a lot of kids who were dealing with mental health issues?
100%. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. In the research I was doing to get my degrees, I started to focus on the youth because I was a youth, and I wanted to think about what made me different from my peers. Like, what was it that uh, why did I make it? You know, how did I make it? And I had to kind of sit with that. So I really used my life and the privilege and the blessing I had of getting an education to try to understand that and then to do something with it. So that's why I zoomed in with the youth first. And I also believe um, the youth are our future, right? As cliche as it sounds, but they're the truth. They're going to replace me. So if I can begin to influence and have a hand in shaping the minds and the lives and the spirits of those that are to come, as I get older, I can feel good knowing that I've done my part in the world. So I believe being able to support our youth is so important, and I think a lot of people expect our youth to just haven't figured out or to not assume that they're going through things because they're young and haven't lived life. But when we think about the genetics that's passed down from generation to generation, the hereditary behavior, the environment that a lot of our young people land in environments that they had no control of, like I was in an environment. I mean, that's my mom and grandma house. I can't tell them what to do up in here. Like I
Mhm.
gotta get with it, and I'm not gonna run away because I ain't gonna know where to go. So I gotta sit and figure it out. So I think about a lot of our youth who are in environments that they can't control, but have no outlet or have no way to express themselves. So that's what drew me to that population at that time. Absolutely. So I saw a lot of it.
We need more black men in those positions to be able to, so for our youth to be able to see themselves, especially in the education system, in junior high school and high school and even elementary. I know, just from my perspective, seeing women, successful women. I use Oprah as an example, maybe a controversial way to bring topic, but I look at those people and I say, if she can do it, I can do it. And if they're not able to see that, then they can't believe that there's something greater when all that they see around them is just despair and adversity and injustice and all of those things. So I think it's so important for people like you to be in those positions around young men, especially because we know their brain doesn't fully develop until the age of 25.
That's
And
right.
so,
Yeah.
and like you said, everything that you're dealing with. So I don't know what we expect from them at that age. It's a lot. It's a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah. I think a lot of times we expect too much from them. You know, thinking about me, I'm 14, 15, and here I am paying rent. How, Sway? Like how? You know what I mean? Like I'm here I am, making sure my grandmother is okay and got what she need. And at the time both my siblings were in jail. So here I am caring for them, while they're incarcerated. Here I am caring for grandma, who's caring for me, but here I am closing the gap
Exactly.
on
Who's caring for
uh,
you?
so yeah, I think sometimes it's unrealistic expectations put on us, especially as boys, when we told to man up and then told don't be like your daddy.
No
Okay.
crying. Yeah, oh, don't be like your dad is a harsh one, isn't it?
Yeah,
And I
that's
don't think
very
we
awesome.
realize the trauma that we're inflicting on people when we say that.
Yeah, for sure. And it's power in what we say. It's power in what we say, and it hurts even more when it comes with the people who claim to love us and care about us because
I'm
we
just
hold on.
having, yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm getting
Oh,
excited.
no,
Yeah,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
we hold on to what they say the most. We hold on. If you hold a certain reverence in my life, if you say
Yeah.
something to me, I grip onto that. So we do have to be very mindful of what we say to our people.
Yeah, I think that's very important. I was just having a flash, just thinking about how some parents will cuss their kids out and call them bastards, just thinking they saying something. But you think about what that, as an adult, when I think about that now, like that's what you was calling your baby. Like you just, scoring them for something they had no control over, you know what I mean? And made them feel bad about it. So really, I really empathize with what's happening. Just when I say mental health, correct me, is that a negative thing to say mental health? Am I,
No,
because I feel like we should be saying if you're suffering from mental health, we should be using a different term, because mental health is just the health of your mental, right? It doesn't necessarily mean you're in a bad position to say mental health, right?
agree. I agree 100%. 100%. I'm someone who believes in that there's power in what we say, and it's not what we say. Sometimes it's how we say it and how we frame it, because it could just land different. I refrain from using mental illness, because it gives this impression that you're sick in the mental, right? And we all got something going on. You just can't see it all the time, but we all
Yeah.
dealing with something. You name it, somebody dealing with it. Some people just mask it better. Some people know how to cope with it better, and others not necessarily know how or have been taught how. So I think that's when we start to judge and you know blame and ridicule and criticize without truly knowing. But I'm of your camp of mental health, because that's what we aspire to have: a healthy mind, a healthy
Okay.
spirit, healthy body. So no, I don't think there's anything wrong with that label at all.
Yes, I'm thinking about that, and I always wonder. So you're saying that if you are having, I would say, a negative mental health experience, um, that's not an illness. It's not considered an illness.
Well, a lot of our the way things are documented and labeled in like the DSM-5, which is the diagnostic manual that clinicians use uh, to associate a diagnosis to what the client is experiencing. And it's a nice thick book. You name it, you can find a diagnosis for it just about. And the thing with mental health is specifically like you know people with major depressive disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, or even more severe mental health issues like bipolar or schizophrenia, personality disorder, borderline personality. Really, it's all about how I view it. To help me understand it, is about extremes, right?
Okay.
Where you're either you're so high and not able to kind of get your feet on the ground to manage what's going on around you, or you're so low that it's hard to even come up. It's hard to even want to be engaged. So I think about depression, for example. Depression is often stuck in the past, where it's hard to let go of some of the experiences we've had. Clinically, we look at how long a person have been experienced the symptoms of depression:
Okay.
withdrawal, not eating too much, coping unhealthy, not motivated to do the things that they typically would do. It's all about how long. We all experience it. I'm of the mind that I can feel depressed, but I don't identify as being depressed, because who I am isn't how I feel. But I recognize that I feel that way, right?
Yeah.
And some people may argue against that, which I'm okay with. But I'm all about the framing. How do we choose to look at it? Because if we can create some meaning around it, it helps us to move with it a little bit more differently. Same with like disorders, and I'm just using the frame disorders for clinical sense of like bipolar, schizophrenia. Is about the time in which these symptoms starts to happen. So schizophrenia, you're talking hallucinations, delusions, where you're hearing things, seeing things that may not be there. You believe, have some paranoia, maybe believe someone's tracking you, watching you when they may not be. When we thinking, bipolar is these high emotions, what we call manic behavior, where your emotions are so tense, your thoughts are so rapid, that the feeling you have is so severe that it comes out in a way that people don't understand, or people mislabel, or
Hmm.
or or cause more harm by putting a word on it, or minimizing it when it's a real thing. So it all depends on again, the two extremes. And the idea is that how do we get a person in the middle? Like, how can we get you to where you can level, not being so high and not being so low? And if we can get you in the middle, then we can make something happen. We can see some change. We can make some progress.
I got
Hopefully that
that.
makes
I get it, and I'm focused on what you said, the time frame, and that's how
sense.
you determine or diagnose. So with
Yeah.
schizophrenia, how long would a person have to be experiencing paranoia, feeling like someone is, watching them, or whatever other symptoms that you said? How long does that need to go on before they're diagnosed with having schizophrenia, that person?
Yeah, it depends on the severity of the schizophrenia, because you also have like personality types with schizoaffective like symptoms. I'm drawing a blank on the exact time, but it's usually about maybe a couple of weeks. So let's say 2 weeks, just the bottom line, right? I'm
Okay.
saying like major depression. You know, if let's say what you know about me, and just off the from what you know about me from the time we've interacted, and then
Hmm.
you see that for a week or maybe 2 weeks, I'm low energy, I'm not as bubbly and I'm
Yeah.
charismatic as I usually am, I'm not as I'm motivated to get up and do things like this. If that has been going on for a week or more, something's going on, right? What's going on with Walter? He's not his usual self, right? And if that extends for 2 weeks, I'm finding myself in a deeper depression. But with things like diagnosis like schizophrenia, if you see it going on for weeks at a time, where a person is just hyper aware, very very verbose, very easily irritable or anger, right? That's severe. That's some signs that some things are going on and out of whack. And it's time to kind of get that person evaluated and supported. And during the assessment phase of an intake, when it comes to clients, as clinicians, we ask those questions. Tell me about what you've been experiencing. I've been, I haven't been able to eat, not been able to get any sleep. I've been sad. How long has that been going on? That's when we're able to kind of catch, okay, this may fall into this category, this may fall into that category. And sometimes we can misdiagnose as well,
Okay.
if we're not careful, because we may hear something, and if we have any bias, assume that it's one thing, but it may be something else. So I think it's important that clinicians, we're careful with the diagnosis we give our people, particularly our Black people, because sometimes those can be used against them,
Exactly.
when it comes to other settings that they're entering.
Yeah, I hear you when you talk about bias. What do you think some of the biases are in your profession when people are listening to their patients describing whatever they're experiencing? What do you think some of the biases that pass through that
Yeah,
conversation?
that's a good question. I think a few biases, and I'm gonna be gender specific for a little while. Men, right? That we are always strong, that
Mhm.
we have to be strong all the time. That because we're angry, we're not experiencing sadness, or that we don't have
Mhm.
emotions. I think there's a bias that we only have one way to express ourselves, and there's so many ways. I think it's often anger is often the default because we have no other ways to express. I think I'm thinking about like cannabis use. I think there's some bias around that,
Yeah.
recognizing that there's a lot more research around other ways of healing and supporting yourself. If a client comes in with the who smokes marijuana, for
Yeah.
example, if there could be a bias that that's the main issue, when there can be many, many other things going on, and they're
Yeah.
coping using marijuana, and they have a healthy relationship with it, right? Where there's not
Right.
disrupting how
Yeah.
they pay their bill, show up for their family, etc. They're using it maybe to sleep. So I think sometimes if we're not careful, we can have a bias based on things that we may not have fixed in our own life, and based on the person that's sitting in front of us. I think with women sometimes is that they just complaining. Oh, y'all just complaining, or you victim all the time. I think sometimes if we're not careful, we'll easily have that bias, and we miss being able to show up for a person in the way that we need. Another piece to say, I think, is this bias that sometimes people just looking for solutions, and that's not always the case. Sometimes people just want to be heard. Just hear me. Just
Yeah.
validate my truth, validate my
Mhm.
experience.
That's it.
You don't have to agree, right? Just
Yeah.
validate it and hear me and hear me, listen to me, so I can feel seen, I can feel heard, and not think that I'm losing my mind, because I know I ain't tripping. I know how I'm feeling is real. But people will make you think how you feeling ain't real. So I would say those are just some biases that come to mind, to your question.
I agree, and I do. I'm touching on what you said, where people may think what you're feeling isn't real. When if I know with your experience, but I've also had experiences dealing with people with mental health. What do we say? What is it correct? What should I be saying now? Poor mental health, or is
Yeah,
mental
poor
health
mistake is
right?
good. Mhm.
Um, I think a lot of times they, like you said, want to be validated. You can't really understand what they're experiencing, but you believe that what they're experiencing is really what they're experiencing. Like,
Yeah.
you're not crazy, you're not losing your mind, but
Mm.
whatever's happening, I'm not in a position to tell you what it is, and I think that you should see a professional. And that's my take on it. And
That's
sometimes people are offended by that because they feel like you're telling them that there's something wrong with them. And that goes back to my whole opening talking about there's could be something wrong with us. And just because it's not physical, because I don't have crutches, I'm not in a wheelchair, doesn't mean that I'm not suffering in some way or another. So I think it's important. And then even with the biases, when we talk about the marijuana, when you do the studies across the board when it comes to races, all races use marijuana at the same rate. So it bothers me when people try to put black people in this box and say that we're the majority of drug users or abusers, when statistics studies show that that's across the board, especially when it comes to marijuana. They got a day called 420, and that's for everybody.
It's for everybody.
I want to.
Yeah,
I got a question in the chat. Shout out to Marmac who's on YouTube. He says,
for sure.
Walter, what advice would you give? What advice would the professional you give that 14 or 15-year-old that lost his
That's,
mother and his father so close in age? Ooh,
that's a good question. I appreciate that. Um, wow, that's a good question. I would say know that what you're experiencing and what you're in is bigger than you. And it may not feel that way right now, but just keep showing up because someone's watching you and someone is deriving their energy from you.
yeah,
And not that you're responsible for the energy they derive, not that you're responsible for them deriving energy from you, but your strength, your perseverance, your determination is giving someone else permission to have some strength, to have some determination, to still show up. And if you can lead without a title, if you can lead without the age or the experience, hats off to you. And you're living in your purpose. And you might not even know what your purpose is, but you're operating in your purpose. So I would say just keep showing up and keep doing
yeah,
what you feel to be true to your heart. And what's on your side is the youth, and of course none of us know the time of the hour that our name will be called from this physical realm. But youth being on your side, just keep living, just keep living. And the darkness that you may have now on life or light would eventually be shed upon it, but you just got to keep showing up. Yeah, that's what I would say to that
I
young
like
dude.
that.
Yeah,
I like that. Thank you for sharing. I like that. You
good
know, I,
question.
Yeah, it was. I was thinking about, again, I mentioned Kanye, and I guess I want to ask you, how do you feel about his situation? I don't know what your political stance is or your stance on the things that he said and done, but based on the fact that he said he's been clinically diagnosed with a bipolar disorder, do you think the Black community should turn their back on him, or how do you feel about that? Do you have any opinion about it?
Yeah, I don't have a strong opinion, but I will share my thoughts. I don't think when a person is vulnerable enough to say, "Hey, here's what I've been diagnosed with," that we should then turn it back away from them, because it takes a lot of courage to say, "Hey, I'm someone who live with bipolar, or I'm someone who live with schizophrenia, or I'm someone who live with a personality disorder, or depression, or anxiety, or whatever that is for you." I think it takes a lot of courage to have to say that, especially in the Black community, when you're told, "Ain't no wrong with you. Just go pray about it. Ain't no wrong with you. Go work. Right? Ain't no wrong with like you just trying to do this and do that." Like when it's minimized like that, and then when the same people that build you up be the very ones that turn it back on you,
Yeah,
it creates this huge void of and this uh, the best term I can use is grief, where it becomes an
yeah,
ambiguous loss where like you
yeah,
here but you ain't here no more. Like, y'all supporting me, but y'all ain't supporting me no more. So I'm saying that to say no, I don't think our Black community should turn their back on him for that. However, I do think when it comes to things that one say and how one behave, we should be held accountable. And I don't think a diagnosis is any excuse for how one behave and how one speaks and how one make impacts others. I don't think that's an excuse for that, and I think that's different, right? How do we bring you closer and say, "Hey, dude, that ain't cool," right?
Yeah.
and get you some support to stabilize your mental health and understand that what you said, what you did, doesn't align with who the pedestal we put you on. You Kanye West, dude, like college dropout. You let us know that polos and backpacks were cool, and that if we didn't go to college, we was gonna be all right. So you got people who are still rooting for you and drawing from that version of yourself. So specifically to your question, no, I don't think we should turn our back on them. I think we should. That's an invitation to pull them in a little bit closer and give them some more love and accountability.
Okay, because I'm processing that for myself. I'm trying to see how I want to feel about Lauren Hill and Eric about doing Dave Chappelle, all them people that pulled up. Because I feel a way, I feel like people should be held accountable. Then at the same time, it's like a contradiction because it's obvious it's something going on upstairs where he's battling and he's struggling. But like you said, people do need to be held accountable. But then do you just let them continue on in that same behavior, or do you continue to support them in that same behavior? And that's kind of like where I'm at the crossroads at. Like, where do you draw the line? And I thank you for your perspective on that. I definitely, I raise the question: is this an epidemic when it comes to Black men in America? Is this an epidemic when it comes to mental health? And I asked that question because, I would say even 10 years ago, I don't remember having this conversation, talking to people just openly saying, "I have a friend who's struggling with mental health," or "I have a brother or son," or just different situations where Black men and young boys are dying by suicide. And now it's like if I meet 10 people, 9 people know someone who's struggling with a mental health condition or who have died by suicide due to whatever mental health conditions they're going through. And I'm like, is this just something we just swept under the rug? Because I think about what was the movie, the Sunday Soul Food back in the day, where the uncle they slid the plate to his door. That's
Mm-hmm.
how we treated people that had mental health issues. And candidly speaking, I had an uncle that was fine up in his high school years, and then one day he just came in and spazzed out. And somebody put something in his drink, and he's been diagnosed with a schizophrenia condition. And I just think about all of that. And I'm like, did we not talk about it? Did we hide people? Did we just close them out in a room and pretend that it wasn't happening? Or is it getting worse? Are Black men being more susceptible based on our environment? We know we're still struggling through this racism. I mean, it hasn't improved for us, but we think about the police violence. We think about all the things that our Black men have to deal with. Has it increased, or have we just been ignoring the signs and symptoms and just keeping it quiet? What do you
Yeah,
think? Or what does your study show?
for sure. Good, really good question. I would say we're in a time now where we have the language to express, we have the vocabulary, to be like, that's the name of it, right? And
Okay.
when you can't name it, you can't tame it, right? When you can't call it out for what it is, I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm just pissed off. I'm just angry, right?
Yeah.
And then there's some other stuff going on, and then as men, when we're told to be strong, when we're told to man up and not be soft, I think that's what we start to do. So we then don't try to learn the language to express ourselves and to identify how we feel. So no, I don't think that is anything new. I just think that it's exposed now. And as I mentioned earlier, when one person is able to say, "Hey, I'm someone who lived with this," it gives another person permission to say, "Wow, me too." Right? I'm thinking about the Me Too movement, right? When a woman finally said, "This is what I've experienced," and the
Mm-hmm.
floodgates opened up Me Too, and it
Opens the
was
door.
people. It was like what it because all I needed was that permission, right? I just needed permission to know that I can
Yeah.
express it and that I'm not the only one, right? And I think sometimes as men, we can feel like we're the only ones until we talk to another brother and be like, "Yo, you experiencing that? Yeah, me too, man. And I don't know what to do with it, and nobody has ever talked to me about it, or my family never allowed me to express myself, or my dad didn't teach me how to display my emotions or to feel, like so many things that come with it. So no, I don't think it's anything new. I just think we have the vocabulary, and now with social media, where everything is shareable and likable, and and can be posted. So I think it gives people that other outlet to say, "This is what we are dealing with. This is what we experiencing." Yeah,
Yeah.
uh, I would say the epidemic that we are experiencing is loneliness for men. We're
Really?
lonely. Yeah, we're very lonely, and hence the uptick in taking one's life, and substance. singleness. So many people, men, that I'm learning that just single, for a
Yeah,
variety
I
of reasons.
know.
So the epidemic is loneliness because if I disclose my vulnerabilities, if I disclose what I'm struggling with, will you judge me? Will you still accept me for who I am? Would you want to be with me, right? Would you still view me as the man that I present when behind closed doors? I'm questioning if I'm even capable of being the man that I want to be, right? So
Mhm.
that loneliness is real for us in this time. And a lot of times I think we can appear to be strong, which I think as men we've mastered well. I can appear to be strong. So I can put on a nice suit and tie and a nice shirt, but when I'm at the
Work
crib, exactly, I can hit the gym, I can look good and pose for a picture. But when I'm late at night with my thoughts and I don't have nobody to sort those thoughts with, and I don't have anyone who can reflect to me how I'm feeling and to help me to understand them, it gets lonely and it gets really dark. That's when we're seeing, men taking their lives.
And shout out to Gucci Man's wife, Keisha Kayor. I think that's how you pronounce her name. Gucci Man, he has his third book that just came out. It's called it's episodes, The Diary of a Recovering Madman. And he admits that he was diagnosed with schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. And he talked about that in a recent interview with his wife. And he just shared how it's a journey, and he finally took accountability, which is one of the key words you use here, for his struggles, and received the help he needed. And again, he had his wife. So when I'm thinking about the keyword that you mentioned, loneliness, having that support system, because she's the one who's able to see the symptoms and signs. Because what I'm learning is people who are actually experiencing it may not know that they're actually experiencing it at that time. It's just what it is. They super happy, or they super mad, or they super suspicious, or whatever's going on, right?
Absolutely.
Um, and to have someone who's not in that condition to be able to see the signs. And that's one of the things that Keisha did. She said she controls this, what's happening. She said when she feels like he's having an episode, she says she shuts down his Instagram. She even changes the passcode. She shuts down his social media, Twitter. She deletes everything, and she just makes him just focus on himself, period. And I just think that's a really good thing. So that whole loneliness thing, I think, is a big deal, because you do need a support system,
Yeah.
someone to be able to recognize what you're going through, understand what you're going through, and help you get through it. So, yeah, I didn't know. I mean, honestly, and this is me being biased or being judgmental, because I know a lot of people from that mumble rap era, which I include Gucci Mane in, that I know some people that I love, enjoy listening to that. But I just figured it was just all a scissor, whatever they call it. You know what I'm saying? And so that was my idea. That's messing up your brain. And then to later find out that no, he actually has a condition which might have even led him to those drugs, as a coping mechanism, which is horrible in my opinion. But just to know later on, to find out that he actually does have some things that he has to manage in order to be able to not get himself in any trouble, was a big deal. So I totally agree, and I like your point to say that loneliness is a thing. So how do you combat that? What do you do? Is that how we get to the counseling aspect, or is there another way to combat?
Yeah, of course, counseling is one, but I think sometimes men are reluctant to go get help because I'll figure it out. I'll be okay, and we used to having to figure it out on our own. But I think to your point, having people who can love us through it, and not just cast us away. And unfortunately, sometimes when individuals have severe experiences like schizophrenia and bipolar, it can really push people away, scare people
Mm-hmm.
away. If you don't know what it is that you're experiencing and what they're going through, yeah, it can really ruin a lot of relationships. And it's not something that can be cured, but it's certainly something that can be managed with the right support.
Okay.
But for men, I think getting in spaces with other men. So it may be going to the gym, right, where you get a chance to talk to other brothers. Going to play a little basketball, and if you even if you don't play, just being in an environment just to be around others with different energy that you can derive from, right? I
Yeah.
believe that we are energy beings, and if we can be in an environment, even if we're not at the highest frequency of ourselves, if we could be in a space where the energy is right, I think we can
Mhm.
we can we can take something from that. You know what I mean? It's like you being in a party, like when the vibes is good, it's like I didn't want to be here, but I'm here now, right? It's one of those, and that energy starts to create. So I think as men, we do well when we're in community, when we're when we got a brother or a friend that we can lean on who can hold us accountable and still love us through it and
Yeah.
call us in, right? I think it's when we're outcast, when we're embarrassed or put out there, is when it really turned us off. And I think unfortunately that's what leads to a lot of that loneliness or men staying silent because now what I share with you, you're going to use as a weapon against me.
Yeah.
You
And it
or
happens.
it does, or those same messages get perpetuated. You just being soft, you just being a punk. It's like, no, I'm
Yeah.
tired. I'm
No,
tired.
I'm
And
gonna
when a man says he's tired, I think it's important for people to listen because not often we say we're tired. We just keep going.
that would be a trigger word for me because I can't, I'm trying to think of ever hearing that from a man. I mean, I he's tired. I internalize, not that he's mentally just overwhelmed with life and navigating whatever's going on inside of his mind.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, yeah.
It's
And it can certainly be, and sometimes we may have to say that, hey, that word triggers something in me. Let's find another buzzword, right? Let's find another word that I can understand when that come from. That comes with opening up that communication line,
yeah,
because it can be triggering from experiences in the past. And I believe in relationships, though we're not responsible to heal the wounds that a person come with. I do believe it's our responsibility to soothe those wounds and how we
yeah,
communicate and how we engage and how we show up and how we support. I can't fix them because I can't fix them out in calls, but if you
yeah,
decide to share space with me, I can be gentle in how I engage with you and help you to work through what it is that you're having to
yeah.
live with. Hmm.
Understood. And again, 18%, the statistics show that about 18.6% of Black adults experience mental illness. And that translates to like 7 million individuals. And Black men are just a significant number when you compare that to Black women. Um, and I just think about that. And then just even with the suicide rate, Black men are 4 times more likely to die by suicide than Black women. In the recent studies, they've shown that there's 60% rise in suicide rates amongst Black boys. I want to get into some of the treatment factors and just talk about that because when I think about people dying by suicide, I do think it has a lot to do with whatever's going on with them outside of any type of treatment that's causing them to feel away and think away and pushing them in that direction. But I also think medicine has a lot to do with it too in some instances. So I wanted to see what your takeaway is. So the two main things I hear you talking about is schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. Would you say those are the two main issues that most people deal with when it comes to mental health and Black men in particular?
No, not at all. No, I was just picking on those two because they're quite the prominent ones. But no, men we're depressed. We have a lot of symptoms of
Depression.
depression. Um, we're quite anxious. We're talking about generalized anxiety, social
Hmm.
anxiety, being in a room full of people. And what that does to us and how that hijacks us and causes us to become paranoid. Because I remember when I was in a room full of people and a brawl broke out and somebody got shot, right? When we think about PTSD, right?
Yeah,
So some of our life experiences causes us to now develop and then to develop these diagnoses and mental health issues because of our environment and what we've been exposed to, right?
yeah,
Sometimes it's hereditary and genetic. Sometimes it's, I mean, you live on a block where somebody gets shot every day and you see a couple of dead bodies and tell me how you start to view life. You know what I'm saying? You get robbed a few times and then told to show up a certain way. You tell me how you would navigate in a room full of people. You know what I mean? So just picking on those, but no, we're not short of experience in any of the other diagnoses because we're men. No, we're not exempt, not at all.
okay. So what's the first step if you feel like as a young male or as an adult male, if you feel like something's not right and you can't put your finger on it, nobody's really understanding, it's causing you to not be able to function in society, go to work, just be around people. What's the first step that person should take?
Good question. I got a lot of answers to it. One of the safest route is to if one engages with their doctor, right, their primary physician. That's a good first step. By law, As providers, we sign an oath to confidentiality. I mean, it's our job to do what's in the best interest of the client and to make sure they set up with the best resources for their
Mhm.
safety, for their life. So if you engage with your doctor, that's a good place to start. To say, hey, many doctors already do like a personal health questionnaire where they asking you, how difficult has it been for you to eat? Not at all, very difficult. Doesn't apply, right? They ask a bunch of questions to kind of get an idea of where you may be at on your functioning, right? As far as your mood and your ability to do the things that you need to do. So that could be the first step, and then from there, your doctor can recommend some different treatment options. Hey, I recommend you see a psychiatrist because of this, that, and the other, or I recommend that you talk with a therapist or see a counselor just to have to process.
Okay.
Example, I have a gentleman on my caseload. He's been diagnosed with sickle cell, and he was in the hospital being treated for his sickle cell, and the social worker would say, "Hey, do you have a therapist?" Right, and they referred him to me, and I've been supporting him for some years now. But to that point, him being in that environment to get his physical health taken care of, they realized that he was dealing with a lot of distress mentally and just needed someone to talk to.
Imagine.
Now, how
Yeah.
do we support both, right?
Yeah.
So I would say that would be the first best step, and I really want to urge that because we got to take care of our health too. Our health is our table that we build life upon. So if we're not taking care of our health, um, as life stacks on us, we get crushed. So going to your doctor, I think it's a good first step to do that.
And I want to encourage you guys all who are watching now. We're present with Walter Williams. Who, if you have any questions, you can get some free advice right now. Some
Okay,
information. Don't be shy. Don't be shy in the chat to ask any questions. I'm sure anything that he can answer, he will. And if not, I'm sure he'll, direct you to where you need to go.
for
So,
sure.
but yeah, so the first step is to go see a doctor, and then they will determine where you need to go next. And I do hear you say that sometimes people are misdiagnosed, um, and that's scary because then I always think about medicine in that aspect. Like some people self-medicate, and this is why I was asking the question: like, at what point do you decide you need to seek professional help? Because some people will just drink, or maybe just have a lot of sex, or do drugs, or be violent, or just withdraw, whatever it is that they feel like is benefiting them, from not dealing with whatever they're dealing with, whatever's coaching whatever they're dealing with. I think I appreciate you saying that it's okay to go see a doctor and let them determine what the issue is. So then the next step would be, if there is medication involved, do you have any biases towards any medications or any recommendations? I had a friend who mentioned that her son, I'm trying to get the type of disorder he had, and I think it was a schizo, I forgot how she labeled it. What was the title she used? And I had it in front of me, but it's a disorder. It's under schizophrenia, and he takes medication called Abilify. And she said before then, she didn't specify the medicine he was taking before, but it just kept him down, and he just wasn't his personality. And so once he got on this Abilify, she says he takes it once a month. He's active. She says the symptoms are whatever you like to do the most, you'll do even more. So if you like to work, you're going to work more. If you like to, you know, dip it low, you're gonna dip it low more. Whatever it is that you enjoy doing, you would do more. And so I wanted to talk about that too, because I know a lot of people don't want to be put on drugs. I know there's CBD, there's different things that may help. Can you throw some things out there that may help people once they may be diagnosed with any type
Yeah,
of?
for sure, for sure. So psychiatrists, they're the ones who prescribe the medication, right? They do
Mhm.
the medication management for one's, different mental health needs. So I'm not trained and licensed to speak to any particular medicine, but I will say that medicine helps to stabilize our mood.
Okay.
I think when we're dealing with severe mental health issues like a bipolar or a schizophrenia type, especially when we're thinking about the hallucinations, the paranoia, the delusions, the extreme emotional or the extreme manic, we need something to help stabilize our mood. Essentially, what that's just saying that your chemical imbalance in the chemical in your brain are imbalanced, and what the medicine does, it helps to bring back some of that balance. mood stabilizers is what many of them call, right? It stabilizes your mood. The
Okay.
issue that happens is sometimes, again, we're human. Sometimes a person can be over prescribed, right, with a diet, with a dosage that's too high for their blood type, for their genetics, for their age, and what have you. And the con becomes it's like a trial and error sometimes because you may get one prescription at this dosage that have you completely down. You got another, you try it again, and then it's really high. So it's almost like you got to keep trial and error until you find that sweet spot. And many psychiatrists will say that. At least I hope that they would kind of let one know. But once you're able to find the recipe that works for you, it's life changing. I have clients who carry those diagnoses, and
Yeah.
they are aware of it, and they manage it, and they know that they need to take their medication. I have a client in particular I'm thinking about who partner has schizophrenia,
Hmm.
and I try to help him recognize the signs before a manic episode hit. And the first thing I always ask, has she stopped taking her medicine? And the answer most of the time is yes. So when one began to not take their medicine and adhere to the prescription, or to the treatment plan, it derails and it can cause a lot of chaos and disruption. But so there's some pros and cons to it. So I'm not one to say yes, go get medicated right away. If there are other things that you can do to cope with your experiences and your symptoms, by all means, I think you should exhaust all options. But I have seen in my personal life, having family members, my brother, who was diagnosed with bipolar, I have seen the effects it will have on being able to stabilize the mood so that you can be able to work with the person to be able to engage with them and support them where they are.
Wow, that's good to know. Yeah, because that's so scary for me. And I think the word she used was schizo aggressive. Is that familiar to you?
Mm,
That sounds like a hood
yes.
term, don't
Yeah.
it?
Yeah. It could
That
just be
sounds
that
crazy.
he can go there, right? When that energy you talking about some, some rage, maybe destroying rooms,
Yes, you described that. Yeah,
hurt people, kind of what, as we say, we see red or we go black, that's when a person is kind of at that level.
yeah,
And those are people that I believe, medication helps to keep them from hitting that ceiling, if you will. So if we can keep it somewhere in the middle, or catch it before it hit that ceiling, we able to support that person, to protect themselves and to
yeah,
protect people because they hurt themselves too, when they get to such a manic episode.
yeah. When you talk about chemical imbalance, what are you saying exactly? Is it something where your cells, or is it hormonal? Is it diet? Is it just intake of social media? What is causing things not to be balanced? I mean,
Oh,
as
that's
a
a
Libra, for me, I need things to be balanced, right? So everything has to be copacetic on both ends, and that's just it. But when it comes to the mental stability, what is the off tick for people who are having this illness? Not illness.
yeah. It's That's a difficult one to answer because there's so many factors at play, right? When you're talking genetics, um, you know, we we can inherit depression and anxiety and schizophrenia and bipolar, right? Mama may not have it, but grandma may have. Daddy didn't have it, but great granddad may have, right? And
Yeah,
research shows that it can skip a generation, and
yeah,
we wondering why this kid being like this. I ain't like this. Well, we ain't doing this in our house. Let's look at the history. Let's look at the family history and
yeah,
the fact that grandma, granddad, or whomever dealt with alcoholism or was
yeah,
extremely abusive or had a lot of trauma that they experienced, right? We talk about post-slavery syndrome, right? Where we're
yeah,
still feeling the benefits, not the benefit, excuse me, the residue of what our ancestors
yeah,
went through during that time and how it shows up in our behavior to this day. So when we talk about that's one layer, environment is another layer. If you grew up in a chaotic environment, I'm, every day I'm thankful just to have my right mind. Every day, every
yeah,
day.
man. Me
You
too.
grateful? Just Donny Hathaway got a song. Thank you, Master, for my soul. That's when I'm in my mode and I just need to just be reminded. Like I put that on to just ground me to say, thank you, Lord, for my mind. Right. And not to make this platform one of those, but
That's what
it's my environment could have, I mean, could have killed me. I could have killed myself, and hurt so many other people. So just to have the the strength to control my mind in the midst of the chaos I was in. That's not everyone's testimony, but the environment plays a part of that too. When you grow up in an abusive home, a chaotic home, a drug-ridden home, if you aren't loved, if you aren't nurtured and in an environment and get the in the nature of the environment, right? That nature versus nurture piece is huge. So to answer your question, that's a loaded question,
Yeah.
and there's so many factors at play. But it does, right? If we get too much or too little of something, whether it's genetically based on our environment, it starts to alter something in our psyche. It starts to alter something in our brain chemistry, and we need some reinforcers, like medication, to help kind of get us back on track. And it can be a lifesaver and it has been a lifesaver for many many people.
So none of these things, depression, bipolar, or schizophrenia, you're saying they're not curable. They're just treatable.
I think all things are just treatable. I think, nothing's created or destroyed. Things just turn into something else, right? It's once you become aware of what you're experiencing, and once you begin to understand what you're experiencing and do something about it, right? It's one thing for me to know that my diagnosis is causing me to behave a certain way. It's another thing once I know that I do something about it that makes the difference. And I think that's what distinguishes people who want to be well and do well.
Yeah.
Just look at what they do. I won't help, but are you taking the steps to get the help, right? I
Yeah.
want to be better. I want to be in a healthy relationship. I want, but what are you willing to do, right? Is often the question. A lot of times people ain't willing to do nothing. They think it just go appear out of you still gotta put in that work. So
Yeah.
it's the behavior changes that we start to make that helps us to manage the symptoms. It helps us to keep control of it. Same with like individuals who use substance. I'm always with my clients. I have clients who they be like, yeah, I smoke. I ain't here to judge them, but
Yeah.
I'm always wondering what's your relationship with it. Is it controlling you or you controlling it? How does it impact how you work, your engagement with your kids, engagement with you taking care of your hygiene and taking care of your crib, et
Yeah.
cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? What's your relationship with it? Because now I can get an idea of, is that an area I need to spend a lot of time in, or should we spend some time focused on these other areas, and maybe your usage would just decrease or disappear, or maybe it's not, maybe just something you enjoy doing. And I'm just picking on that
Yeah.
for an example. It could be many other things at play. But yeah, but hopefully that answers your question. It's like I'm going off
I
the
mean, I,
tangent.
I, I think you're right on point because I was thinking about, in terms of addiction, drugs, and alcohol. And I know what people who have, recovering, they say they're recovering from alcoholism, they will tell you that they're still an alcoholic, even if they haven't had a drink in 25 years. It's like something like you said, you have to manage if it's just a mental thing and steps, going to AA and being around people who, keep you on track, or maybe there is medication involved and things of that nature. So
Mhm.
it's good to know that this is a lifetime thing that's gonna be happening if you're dealing with some type of mental health things. Because I think, like with depression, I think it comes and goes for some people.
Mhm.
Grief can bring along depression, a breakup, a job loss, you have a disability, but then you might be able to pick up and go. But then there are some people who just have something going on chemically that causes them to feel away, regardless of what's good or bad happening around them. And so I think it's good to be able to look at those things and be able to know that there is a difference, and that you just have to continue treating it. Be present and understanding that. Even the things that you say to yourself, like I heard someone say, "Don't say my schizophrenia because you don't own that," or my
Mm,
anxiety, which I have a habit of saying because I have times where I feel it in my gut, right in that middle of your center of your chest, but it's
mhm,
this feeling like something's gonna happen, something's not gonna be right, or maybe something good's gonna happen, but it's always negative for me.
mm,
It's the
yeah.
thought of something not gonna happen the way I want it to happen, and I don't know what it is. And now I have to concern myself with this until the feeling goes away or something happens. And it's the worst feeling in the world to sit with that. And
I hear that. I hear that, and that's tough. That's tough. And if I can say, I think it's good that you're aware of that your default is to negative,
mhm.
but know that negativity doesn't work 100% of the time,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
we also recognize that positivity works, but it doesn't work 100% of the time either. So what I like to suggest is, how do we get to neutral, right? What's the neutral ground? It's not terrible, and I don't know what's going to happen on the upside, So some things are just is. I don't know what it's going to be, but I'm gonna show up anyways, right? I don't know. I feel this way. To your point, I'm not anxious, but I feel anxious, right? It's a difference. There's a
Yeah, I
distinction.
feel anxious.
Recognize it as a feeling because the feeling comes and it goes, and it can hit you like a wave, and then it could just be a little drop. It just depends on the situation. But it's good that you're aware of that. But my challenge to you is, how do we get to neutral so that we can still do the hard thing and allow the emotion to move with you? Because if otherwise you give control to the emotion, or you allow that emotion to have power over you.
Exactly. I hear you when you say that, is emotion controlling you, or are you controlling it? I deal with
Yeah.
that on a daily basis because I also read somewhere there's thousands of emotions, and I do believe emotions are real. Whether it's valid, whether the way you respond might not be cool, but whatever you're feeling is what you're feeling in that moment, and you have to talk yourself through it and
Yeah.
work yourself through it. And I think it takes. I think that's when you can call someone strong, when they can at least recognize it. Maybe they're not able to do the necessary steps to stabilize it or neutralize it, but just saying, I recognize that I'm feeling away, and now
Hmm.
I have to remember not to go take nobody out. I have to go count to 10 backwards, bake a
Straight up.
cake, and go vent to a friend for four
Yep.
months and hopefully I'll feel better after.
Well,
I
you
want
got
to
your
get.
recipe. Yeah.
Yeah, so I do. I give credit to people who at least are able to recognize the symptoms and whatever emotions they're going through, even if they may not be able to get through them. Because my thing is, if I know I'm struggling, I don't know if I can handle it, I'll tell you it's not a good time right now. I'm feeling extremely upset, or I'm feeling really anxious,
Hmm.
or and so then they at least know who they're getting right now. Who you're getting, and most of the time the people around me, I'm blessed to be able to have people around me that once I say that, they can help me navigate through that. We get through it together. They don't just leave me hanging like, well, I gotta go. They just like, well, okay. It usually ends in rocking. I'm sorry, I know that's not the answer. We go have a drink and we just watch a movie and just calm down or talk, something of that nature.
But people appreciate that though. So people appreciate that because when you can be transparent, people know how you coming. You know what I'm saying? When
Yeah.
we first met, you introduced yourself as Latoya. I'm like, do you call you Toya for short? She was like, nah, Latoya. I got it, right? And I didn't take it rude. I'm like, okay, like she's very transparent in how she wants to be addressed, and
Yeah.
I don't need to know why, but in that transparency, I'm like, all right, cool, Latoya,
And I
that's
don't
it.
mind sharing. I really don't. Because I
No, no, no.
started
Yeah, yeah,
just to
yeah.
say, I know there are people out there, because it's still triggering to me for people that don't know me to call me Toya,
Hmm. Understood.
because it's a it's like a warm hug when people call me Toya, because that's not my
Mhm.
full name, but that's what my family called me. People that know me, like they can tell me about myself when I was two, they've
Sure.
known me for a time. So it's just like a home, it's like a home feeling to hear Toya from
Understood.
people that I could say that person know me, versus being called Latoya by strangers, that identifies that you really don't know me like that. And once we build that affection or whatever
Right.
it is that comes with that, then it'll feel that way. So that's where that comes from. Because I
Makes
started
sense.
off with Toya in your ear because that I always had a vision of just having a radio show when I was a teenager. And that was my whole Miss Toya in your ear. I'm in your ear. So what's on your mind? And I had this whole thing. But then people just started calling me Toya. And I'm like, you don't know me. It's kind of like when Beyonce said everybody started calling her Bae. And she was like, no.
Mhm.
And it's like the cat's out the bag now. You know what I mean? Like that was something that people close to her husband called her mama called her, or B, was it Bay or B? But so I understood what she meant by that. So that's where it comes from. So it's kind of
Makes
like, you
sense.
know me.
Yeah. It makes total sense. But what I took from that is you set the tone for how people engage with you, and I
Yeah.
respect it, right? Like here's how, if you want to be in this space with me, here's how I want you to address me and respect. Here's the respect I look for, and
Yeah.
for a person to not honor that, I think is a lack of maturity.
Yeah.
But in other words, that's a boundary, right? Here's how you want to treat me, and if you can't honor and respect this, then I ain't got nothing for you. Who can
Yeah.
argue? That's
Yeah. It's
transparency.
affectionate to me, and I don't feel affection towards everyone or think everybody's coming from an affectionate place. I think they might just be being lazy, or might not be nothing. They just just think they know a lot of Toyas. You see a lot of people on reality TV now named Toya, and they think they can just shorten everybody's name. But
Right.
I'm working on myself. But I agree. I think we do set boundaries, and if people don't know, then how you have to let them know in order for them to correct themselves. And if they choose not to out there, then it could be a misunderstanding. Let me get in this chat because Shanta
For
Jackson has
sure.
something to
Yeah.
say. she's dialing back. So we talked about, I kind of mentioned how social media, I think, can affect the mental health of people, and just get them going down a whole rabbit hole, and it could affect, the paranoia and just the whole deep thought, right? Negative deep thought in particular. But she said, with the understanding of how social media impacts the brain and mental health, what advice would you give to parents or of toddlers and young children? Ooh, you've seen these. Have you ever tried to take an iPad from a baby?
Oh, I
You better
know.
know how to fight.
Some
You better
strength.
know how to fight.
Yeah, yeah, it's tough. It's tough. That's a good question, Shaz. It's you know, and I'm mindful because I have a 2-year-old at home, who has a iPad, and he's not on social media, YouTube. I wouldn't say that social media
Yeah,
explicitly, but it's a form of it. And he know how to navigate it and get to it, all of that.
yeah,
To the question specifically, one, I think it's important that parents watch what their kids watch. As boring or as unenthused as it may be, I think it's important to just sit and listen, even if you're not fully undivided attention, but just being an earshot to what they're listening to is important. Reason why I say that is because some of these, YouTube channels and characters, they mean well, but they may be teaching your kid a behavior or a way to
yeah,
respond that doesn't align with the values in your house.
yeah,
Um, we were listening to a video my son was watching, and the character was like, owie, owie, I'm scared. I don't want to do something. And I don't want not that I don't want my son to feel the emotion of being scared, but I don't
yeah,
want him to think that everything is scary, because everything is not scary, right?
yeah.
So
Right.
me hearing that, I'm like, block. We're not gonna even feed
Yeah.
that to your brain,
Right.
because everything does not going to render you to be scared. I want you to be confident and resilient, right? So I think it's important that parents listen. One, two, I do think it's important that parent put the parental guardrails on these devices, because people sneak things in. Um, Things pop up and kids just click, and they may then clicked on something that they shouldn't have, and then your credit
Yeah.
card being charged, or somebody got your information, and you
Woo!
wonder.
Oh, I got stories. I got a nephew.
See, yeah, I heard plenty of them. So
Listen.
I think that's another thing. Three, I think there should be some balance. One, I believe our kids should be exposed to technology, because this is the age that they're living in. It's not going anywhere. And for our Black kids particularly, they'll be the first to get left behind. So I do think it's important that they're exposed to it. They know how to use it within parameters and within safety, of course. You know what I'm saying? Um, but I do think there has to be a balance where they still challenged to critically think for themselves, to be their own person. And what I say, to use the mental faculty that we all have in their imagination. How fun did it used to be going out and just having to make up something? Let's
Yeah.
play red light, green light. Okay, stop and go. Like, just using your imagination on
Red
things,
light,
right?
green light. I mean,
Yeah, like all these games we came up with that challenged us to think critically and be creative. And that's one thing I don't want kids to lose, is that their creative ability. And I think sometimes social media can give this impression that everybody's doing the same thing, therefore I shouldn't. When everybody do it their own way. So that would
yeah.
be some advice that I would give. Watch it with them. Put the parental control. Make sure that they learn how to use it and navigate it in a safe and healthy way. But keep some limits to it, because I think too much of anything is bad for anybody.
And I know we're going to be closing out soon. I do have another question in the chat that I wanted to
This is good.
add. And I want to thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. You showing up, and, for my audience. And I'm just very happy that you were able to come. But just piggybacking on this whole social media thing, I do know this scientifically, they design these programs for children by the way of color, by the way of sound, even keywords, to program them, to get their minds to where they got them. And so these kids are addicted to something, not that they're learning anything, they're just addicted to whatever is generating from that tablet or whatever, the iPhone or the Android. And I think that it is affecting the brain. And I think they know this, that they're doing it intentionally, and that all of what you said, parents need to take control of, monitoring their kids, limiting their use. Everything happens the way it's supposed to happen. I wasn't supposed to have a child in this era, because my baby would think I was mean mommy. Because it would be maybe an hour a day on a tablet, maybe, because I see how these kids respond and react to it. And then the other thing is, as they get older, we go through that phase of needing approval from our peers. And then you have people who are dealing with mental health issues because they're being told, sadly, to go kill yourself or you're ugly. And it could be the most beautiful child, and they're coming home talking about, I'm ugly, I'm fat, I'm too skinny. I even remember having a PE teacher, and I'm going to tell you a backstory. We didn't eat a lot when I was a little kid. I was in the fifth grade. I was very skinny. Listen, I was
Mhm.
skinny into my 30s. I'm reminiscing now. I remember them days with some good old
Okay.
days. But as a kid, five,
Yeah.
in fifth grade, we didn't always have a full meal. So I probably wasn't as plump as all the other kids. This teacher probably didn't know that, or maybe she did from her observation. But she told me one day, it's my PE teacher, she said, I'm going to start calling you Ann for anorexic. And
Mm.
luckily,
Wow.
I had a strong mind. Like it's hard to get to me to a point where I'm going to feel away negatively about myself based on what you say. But a lot of kids don't have that. So imagine saying that to these kids, especially with social media. You got all these likes and all these agrees, and just everybody just attacking. And even as adults, because I will admit that sometimes I'll post something, and if people can say all the nice things, and that one negative comment, it's a thousand. Let me stop exaggerating. It's three comments, and then that fourth one is somebody saying something negative, and now my whole adrenaline just pumped up, like, And so I
Yeah.
think it does affect them in ways that they can't control. And so I'm riding with you on that. Parents, take control. Don't let your kids have so much time with these gadgets, even though they need to know technology. They are
Yeah.
not. They are not your parents. They're not the babysitters, and they're not healthy. It's not
Yeah.
healthy.
No, I agree. I agree. It's a dopamine hit. It's a lot of research around it's dopamine, right?
Okay.
Casinos, right? It's the noise, it's the slots, it's the colors, it's the fast that give us that excitement. And then when I hit, it's like ding 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 ding. Then right now I'm back again trying to get that same feeling. The same with technology, right? The how quick we can scroll from one video to the next within almost 3 seconds, right? It's a dopamine hit. So that alone start to create that addiction, dopamine, dope, right? When we think about how people get addicted to things, because we chasing that feeling every time. And
Yeah.
with kids' brains not being developed, and you said in 25 is when the brain stops, right? Oh man, how our kids start to become addicts at the toddler age. So if we don't
Right.
disrupt it, here we are creating, behaviors that who knows what's going to look like years from now. So
Yeah.
yeah, we got to disrupt that dopamine hit.
I joke about that when people tell me a 50-year-old is acting immature. People that still be repping and dressing head to toe, suited, booted up for they
I,
set. Like, you 50. I'm like, when did you start doing drugs? Because psychologically, we know that if you started by the age of 10, if you're using drugs, it's stunting your growth mentally too. So those are things to consider. Another question in the chat is, as Black parents, what's a realistic and acceptable age to get a child properly evaluated? Or should we even allow our kids to have an early evaluation? And oh my goodness, we know about Ritalin. We know about, especially with our Black boys, right? They're too aggressive. They're overactive, and a lot of times they're bored. They're too smart for this class. Like, they
yeah.
got energy, give them a punching bag, give them something to do. But what do you think is a realistic and acceptable age to have them evaluated if you kind of think it might be something extra?
Yeah. So certain diagnoses, and I won't quote what those are. Uh, Certain diagnoses can be given to kids under a certain age, because again, it can just be behavioral. It can just be a developmental thing, and sometimes we got to grow out of stuff, right? We just need a little more time.
Yeah.
When it's our kid, we ready for that time to be right now. You ain't finna embarrass me. You ain't finna be acting no fool up in my house, right? We want that fix right now. But sometimes we have to grow out of things. And I think as adults now, we think about ways we behaved as kids that we just had to live a little bit longer. And we like, I don't know why I was doing that silly thing, right? Whatever that was. But I think it depends, right? And I know that's not the answer one may be looking for, but I say it depends because if a kiddo is behaving a certain way and you can we, and I say we because I think about the village and the community, if we can begin to help redirect that behavior in a healthy way, positive way, and help them to learn new ways of coping, and we see a shift in that behavior, that says something, right? So do we need to go to the extent of being evaluated? Maybe not, because we've been able to in home, find some in home remedies, for lack of better words, to kind of redirect the behavior. But if it turns into where it's something that's consistent and persistent over time, where a kid is just always angry, always sad, always violent, always stealing, like just again, as I mentioned earlier, the extremes, right? Always high or always low, then I think that's a sign that maybe there's more that's going on
Yeah.
than what I can recognize or that I won't even believe. Now it may be time to get some support and just have an outside perspective come in to evaluate and give some feedback. Because when it's your own, we in denial. Like we don't want it to be our kid. We don't want it
Yeah.
to be our when it's ours. When it's at our front door, it's like, oh Lord, what's going on? But just having someone with an objective point of view come in and say, hey, here's what I'm noticing, here's what I'm seeing, and here are some recommendations. I think that's really helpful. So I can't say at what age. It just depends on the intensity of the behavior for an extended period of time.
Yeah.
But I know in the Black community, we know how to find ways to get our kids to act right. And not saying that we have to go the old school way where we are beaten and talked down to, where we just supposed to,
Yeah.
do as told and be seen and not heard. I'm not saying to that extent.
Yeah.
When we talk about love and empowerment and being reminded that we are born great and to just tap into that, I think sometimes just having that victim versus victor mentality. Like you're not a victim of this. You have to remain the victor or triumph over whatever it is that you in. And I think
Victim
and
versus
Black community,
victim.
yeah, and we have to choose. Do you want to be the victim of the situation or the victor of it? And your
Amen
choice.
to that.
You choose to stay on the victim side, but the empowerment comes when you choose to. No, I'm in control. I'm the master of my fate, the captain of my soul. But that would be my answer to that, Latoya, and to whomever answered that question.
Thank you. I appreciate it. So we're gonna go ahead and as we close out,
Okay. This is
I want to
fun.
get into Think and Grow LLC. I want to know what's that all about. Can people contact you directly if they want to reach you, and what can they reach you for?
Yeah, yeah, of course. So as far as like therapy and clinical work, I'm licensed in the state of Wisconsin and Alabama. Though I live in Arizona, so just to add something more that's like mind-boggling. Like, hey, how you doing all that? When you license in a state, you can practice in that state, right? So with me living in those two states, I was able to obtain my license. Haven't gotten it here because I see all my clients virtually, so I'm purely telehealth. So a lot of clients I engage with is video like this, and I have some clients that we just chat on the phone and give them support they need. But mental health practice where we support people on an individual basis, also on a group basis and couple basis as well, and do workshops and opportunities like these and seminars. My mission is just to help people reshape and restructure how they think. And just poke holes in their ideology so they can see how it impacts their body and uplift their spirit. That mind body connection is real. What we think about, we can start to feel. Right to your point, when I'm anxious in my head, I can feel it in my chest. Why? Right?
Mhm.
But it starts in your head first, right?
So,
But we start to feel it in our body. But once we start to just shift how we thinking about the victim or victor, I can breathe a little bit more. Okay, like just like that, it can bring some solitude or some relief. And then the
mhm.
spiritual aspect is that motivation, that determination, that will, your attitude of how you choose to look at the environment you in or the situation that you're in. So individual work, I work with couples. I have a treatment program for men who are batters. When we think about men who are perpetrators of violence in relationship, I have a program to support them. And I say support because they are perpetrators doesn't mean they don't need support, but it is a treatment program. Yeah, so address things from depression, anxiety, work conflict, relationship conflict, victims and perpetrators of abuse, being able to support that, identity work. So I cover a lot of things, but to drill it down, I'm all about the mindset. How can we just poke holes in how we look at it? And if we can, like Carter G. Wilson said, if you control the person's thinking, you don't have to worry about their behavior. Not that I'm trying to control someone's thinking, but if I can just poke holes in the unhealthy thoughts and to get
Yeah.
and share some light and some insight to kind of shift it, then that's the work that I do. But yeah, folks can reach out to me. Email is best. I do have a website, Think and Grow, LLC.com, all one word, as it is here. Um, I'm on social media, but I don't do the best engaging with social media. So if you email me, your boy gonna get back to you for sure. Latoya can tell you, I'll get back to you. But if you hit me on a DM, it'll be a little slow because I disconnect, I disengage quite often. To really just be present and to keep myself, with some boundaries. So that's a little bit in a nutshell. Wish I had a better pitch, but that's everything.
No, that's good. Walter at Think and Grow llc.com. That's email is Walter at thinkandgrowllc.com. You guys hit him up in his email again. And I'm glad that you mentioned the batter aspect of it. You know, I wanted to ask you about that domestic violence. I noticed you said that you do therapy for men who have been perpetrators of violence. So I really, really like that. I think that's important. And I want to just put that out there into the atmosphere for those who may have, you know, some issues, that you're trying to work through. This could be a landing place for you to
Please.
go, go to the email or the website, thinkandgrowllc.com, and maybe this can be a starting point to just working through whatever you're going through, because it could sometimes it's just, we could just say people are just violent, but a lot of times it has things have triggered the behavior, right? And
Absolutely. Absolutely. And even women who may wonder if they're in abusive relationships. I have
yeah,
quite a few
yeah,
clients that I've helped to see that they were in an abusive relationship just by the conversation and signs and behaviors to bring
yeah.
attention to what they were oblivious to. So for women, as women can be abusers too. Now I ain't trying to get
Yes,
women off the hook. Women can come with that heat. So again, just being able to know, to be aware, and if I can help increase someone's awareness so they can take care of themselves, then I fulfill my duties.
so that's good that you do have services for men and women. I think that's a good thing too. Let me see. I think that was all of the questions. Let me go ahead and give my applause to those who engaged us in the chat, as I do every Saturday when you guys are here. I'll do that now to thank you for watching and chatting. So the applause is coming. As you guys know, your presence is always my presence. So I love and appreciate you all for showing up for me. And again, Walter Williams, it's been my pleasure. There's just so much we can unpack about this topic. So I hope that maybe in the future, I know next month is actually Mental Health Awareness Month. So we can, discuss again. Maybe you'll have something specifically that you want to, highlight. You're welcome to come back and share that with my audience. I would appreciate you. And I thank you for being here. Do you have any takeaways before we get out of here?
Yeah, first, thank you for just inviting me. I'm always humble and honored to be able to just to share the space and to talk about this, and for me to be vulnerable and to talk about my own life and to hear how I try to practice what I preach. I guess that's what
Yeah.
I want to say. And I think for anyone who wants to embark upon this type of work, when you can preach when you can practice what you preach, and it makes it that much more authentic. But mental health isn't just always about what you feel; it's about how you function, right? And a lot of times people really, what's really going on, thinking about just people in general, right? It can be sadness, it can be heartbreak, it can be grief, but sometimes it's the things that people don't say, and it's the things that people can't see. So the goal is never about trying to find a perfect cure, but it's about how do you remain aware of what you have going on, how do you remain accountable, and how do you remain grounded, right? If you can have a level of awareness and be accountable and stay grounded in your truth, the world is yours, so you take care of you so you can take care of everybody else. So my ask to people is just find a moment to do something for you, knowing that the world is going to always ask so much of you, and if you can give yourself that. So that's all I'll say, but those are my takeaways. Be accountable, have some awareness, find a way to get grounded, and don't be afraid to just say, hey, me too, because you're not the only one. Most of the time you're not the only one.
And don't be afraid to reach out. Again, you can go to his email if you have any
Yeah,
questions, Walter at thinkandgrowllc.com. And as you see on the screen, thinkandgrow.com website. And yeah, those takeaways, accountability, being aware and grounded, I think are things that I'm going to make a mental note of and focus on those things, whatever I feel like I'm drifting off. And I appreciate you.
sure,
And
thank you.
for all of you all, it's always love and respect. Until next time, next week, I'll see you. Bye bye.